Florida Governor Ron DeSantis appears to be trying to distance himself from the recent changes that have been made to his state's public school curriculum. Now, last week, the Florida Board of Education approved new guidelines for teaching Black history, which suggests that enslaved people reaped benefits from skills acquired during centuries of forced labor. Reaped benefits. The move comes just months after DeSantis criticized an advanced placement course on African American studies. The changes are now facing significant backlash. Vice President Kamala Harris visited Jacksonville on Friday and slammed the new curriculum, calling it extremist propaganda. This prompted DeSantis to defend his state while also denying any personal responsibility for the new education standards. Take a listen.
Well, you should talk to them about it. I mean, I didn't do it, and I wasn't involved in it. But I think what they're doing is I think that they're probably going to show some of the folks that eventually parlayed, being a blacksmith into doing things later in life. But the reality is all of that is rooted in whatever is factual. They listed everything out. And if you have any questions about it, just ask the Department of Education. You can talk about those folks. But, I mean, these were scholars who put that together. It was not anything that was done politically.
Sure. Some Republican presidential candidates are also speaking out against the Florida Board of Education's new guidelines. Former Congressman Will Hurd wrote on Twitter this: "Unfortunately, it has to be said, slavery wasn't a jobs program that taught beneficial skills. It was literally dehumanizing and subjugated people as property because they lacked any rights or freedoms." Here's what Chris Christie had to say, too.
"I didn't do it and I'm not involved in it" are not the words of leadership. Look, Governor DeSantis started this fire with the bill that he signed, and now he doesn't want to take responsibility for whatever is done in the aftermath of it. And from listening and watching his comments, he's obviously uncomfortable. He only started to focus on this when he decided he wanted to run for president and try to get to the right of Donald Trump. And so I think people see this as politically manipulative. And I'm talking about, Margaret, we're dividing our country into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces. Yeah. And politicians are pitting them against each other to create conflict. And that's not going to make the country bigger, better, stronger, or freer.
So, Eugene, let's just start with how inaccurate and offensive some of this teaching is from the Florida new curriculum there, but also how Governor DeSantis and his anti-woke policies have put him in a box with speaking to a seemingly smaller and smaller portion of the electorate.
This is what happens when you base your entire kind of political career on this. When you say that everybody needs to be anti-woke, this is where you end up. And when you talk to folks in Florida, the whole point of the bill that came through, this is in reaction to a bill that he wanted. It was making clear what he wanted to folks. And it's because he felt, and a lot of people around this country are starting to feel, that we can't teach the correct history of this country because it makes white kids uncomfortable. That is at the base of this, right? That it is uncomfortable to hear that people that look like you put people that look like me in chains and make them do things and beat them and rape them. That is uncomfortable for kids to hear. That is what these folks are saying. But then when you use that as a political cudgel, you have to own it, right? At this point, this is on Ron DeSantis. He may not have created these policies with the school board, but at the end of the day, he made it very clear to what he wanted to the folks in that state.
Yeah, no, completely agree. I think you have to put it in the context that there's been an effort to sort of desanitize American history, specifically American colonial history, and this was done in that context. The actual curriculum, if you read it, it's just one line, right? It's just one line. It does use the word benefit, and that obviously is problematic. And what's striking to me, beyond just that it got to this point to begin with, which is crazy, is that there's not someone in that orbit, in his universe, who has the maturity and the capacity to say, this wording is problematic, maybe we can go back and revise it. We recognize that we've sort of lit a fire, let's try to revamp it. Because that would be sort of a rational human thing to do, is like, look, we didn't mean to offend anyone, let us, scrub it and replace it with something else. But in a political context, you can never admit that you've made a misstep. And more importantly, I think for DeSantis, he doesn't want to back down from something that goes with his brand, which is we are going to push back against all these efforts to promote diversity and inclusion, and we want to sanitize our history.
Go ahead. And I mean, it also it has real impact on the state, his anti-woke agenda, because Florida has a teacher shortage now, right? It has become harder for people in the state to want to teach.
Yeah, and this we'll get into a little later in the show some of the fundraising issues that DeSantis is having right now, and staff firings he's had to conduct. But Jackie, this just seems like it's another political fight that he's picked and now losing.
I mean, even just looking at his body language during that statement, it was like bobblehead DeSantis was back. But it does, I think Sam is absolutely right. It speaks to an issue that people have long criticized DeSantis for, especially some of the people on the Trump side of things who previously worked for DeSantis in Florida, which is he can't keep staff because he doesn't take advice from anyone. He doesn't have any senior people around him to help him navigate this, and he is speaking to an increasingly small slice of the base, not even the electorate. And as you just noted, we're right out of the gate here, and he is blowing through money. He had a fairly decent haul. He's blown all of it on staffing so far. Is already laying people off. It sort of feels like Rick Perry 2016 had some, or Scott Walker as well. I guess a handful of them for that matter.
You talked about his body language showing how uncomfortable he is. Look at Chris Christie's body language. Is anyone in this campaign having more fun than Chris Christie? Because the chances of him getting the nomination pretty low. I mean, maybe if some kind of bank shot against New Hampshire, but he is making the case that the other Republicans are afraid to make, and he is having a ton of fun.
Certainly, he's positioning himself as truth teller, and if Donald Trump skips that first debate, you can imagine Governor Christie is going to train his fire on Governor
the truth
DeSantis.
teller who is the first to endorse.
No,
Donald
of course,
Trump.
we should never lose that context, the validation he gave Trump back in 2016. The Washington Post's Jackie Alamany, I suspect you have a busy week ahead. Thank you for
Barbieheimer.
Yes,
that movie.
Don't worry about the impending indictments. Get to the movies. Thank you for joining us this morning.